From the vineyard to the shelf in China, a webinar to understand the current status of the wine business in China. The European Union SME Center is a European Union Commission funded project which helps European Union small and medium enterprises prepare to do business in China by providing them with a range of information, advice, training, and also support services. I am Rafael, your speaker today. I follow carefully some industry segments in China, and wine is one of them. Today's webinar is addressed to wineries from European Union interested in exporting wine to China. It is not a webinar for discussing wine terms or grapes or wine quality, etc. Do not expect we comment today things like manual destemming or malolactic fermentation. The webinar in itself has a strict commercial approach aimed to provide you with a full understanding of the wine imports market in China. We hope it is useful, and of course, we appreciate your feedback. We will answer questions such as how big is the market? Is it China a nation of wine drinkers, which is the typical order of an importer? One of the less known things for wineries in the European Union is price formation. What would be the price in Chinese currency of my wine in China? If my wine has an export price of, let's say, €5, what will be the price in renminbi in a shop in China? Why? Also, who can tell me the price of a certain wine in China? How can I find out? It is crucial to know also the pricing demography of the imported wines. What are the most popular price tranches for the imported wines? Perhaps a winery wants to sell in China a wine that has an export price of, let's say, €20. Is it price-wise? Importers also are not equal. We try to categorize them in the section number 4. Your approach on fate in China is very much related with the type of importer with whom you deal with. Sales channels are also crucial. How do I funnel my wines to Chinese consumers? Shall I do it through wine shops, through supermarkets, online, cross-border e-commerce? In section 6, we introduce our full guide on how to start exporting wines to China. Here we do not talk about market report. Here we give you details on how to sell in China. This report we will soon launch is for sales people. It's for people interested in selling. So we will explain the sections, and I expect it will be of interest for many of you. We provide a bonus in section 7, which is the China statistics for the first quarter of 2017, some winners, some losers, and finally, conclusion. We summarize our key findings. We share these key findings with you, and we present our conclusion. We advance you that our conclusion is that you have to have a look at China's wine market, and it is worth to do it. Certainly you hear lots of news about China and the business of imported wine. Probably you never have time to stop and check how big is it. Is it really that big? During 2013 and 2014, the market of imported wine suffered a shock. You can see on the slide the red circles I painted for you, showing very small or negative growth during these 2 years. The main reason was the so-called crackdown on corruption. The extravaganza of using very expensive wines for bribery or to gain influence was cut by the policies of Mr. Xi Jinping, and in fact the so-called gifting channels was exterminated by such policies. This affected the opportunistic importers, which were in the wine business not because they liked it, simply because it was extremely lucrative. The more expensive, the better. Of course, this type of business did not create at all a culture of wine. It was just a tool to make money, with unbelievable margins and high profits. The bottom line was wine imports plummeted during those 2 years, 2013 and 14. Importers were desperately getting rid of stocks, and many disappeared from the market. But it also produced a healthy result. The wine business became more related to the wine itself and to consumers. The imports improved in 2015 and 2016, but most importantly, now imports reflect the real market. Now the figures are related with wine real drinkers. Before, the size of the market was kind of illusion, with the market distorted because wine was not for drinking, it was for other purposes, for other reasons. However, after 2015 and 2016, we can say it is a real market that in 2016, and for the first time ever, has seen the wine imports go above the €2 billion mark. A table on top shows total imports for all types of wines, while the table at the bottom shows figures for bulk wines. Regarding bulk wines, Chinese wineries do not often achieve the volumes expected or the alcohol content which is easy to obtain for European Union wineries, so they have to turn to supplies of foreign liquid. These wines are later branded with a domestic brand, sometimes at a price far higher than we would expect. Let's move into some more numbers, which points to China becoming soon the second largest wine market after the United States. If we forget the sparkling wines, you have also the stats in the table at the bottom. If we forget the sparkling wines and only talk about the still wines, there is a high chance that China becomes the largest market worldwide in, let's say, 3 years. However, let me increase the granularity. If we take into consideration the volume and the value, we can see that the imported wine is equivalent to less than 4 glasses of wine per capita per year. I mean, 1 glass of imported wine per person and per quarter doesn't look a lot. Okay? So in terms of per capita, the consumption is very low. However, we need to increase the level of detail, the granularity, and it is a fact that in 2016, the total consumption of wine in China actually was reduced. I mean, if we include also the domestic wines. That means that if total consumption is being reduced, but imported wines are growing, then foreign wines are gaining market share over local wines. And a country where foreign wines are gaining market share over local wines, over domestic wines, of course is of interest for you. The total market for China, including the domestic wine, is about 1.6 billion liters. So if you take a look into the numbers, you see that imported wines is about 40% of total wine consumption. Okay? Still very low because this is equivalent to 1.3 liters per person per year, while United States is around 9 liters, a country like Portugal around 40 liters, Spain 18 or 20 liters, don't remember well, but still China is a country where consumption per capita is small. These two tables also show that the still wines dominate, and certainly after the crackdown on corruption, the expensive sparkling wines suffered a lot. No question that there is a space for sparkling wines. Many people ask us quite frequently. But the combination of three facts, a trend towards cheaper sparkling wines, such as Proseccos. The fact that sparkling wines have to be served at the temperature that average Chinese consumer considers a bit too cold, along with an excess of stock in the past, has resulted in a poor performance of sparkling wines. Okay? They do represent no more than 4% of total imports. However, most of the importers have in their assortment around 8% of sparkling wines in number of SKUs, which is about twice the demand of the market. So they have more sparkling wines than, let's say, the total demand of the market. Perhaps big hopes, which have not been transformed yet into a reality. I'll explain in a minute why the pictures of President Xi Jinping, but our question about the size of the market, we can frame in a different way to give you a different perspective. Before we have framed the question in terms of absolute numbers and finding out that the consumption per capita is very small. But we can ask ourselves, is China a nation of wine drinkers? Well, in terms of absolute numbers per capita, the most honest answer is no, or no yet. China actually is a beer country and also a baijiu country. Baijiu is a white distilled spirit with high alcohol content, usually 50% or more. These two drinks, baijiu and beer, are widely known by all Chinese, not the same for wine. A Chinese citizen would not be unusual that saying that he or she has never tasted a glass of wine. And in some cases, many probably have never seen a bottle of wine. Why I use the image of President Xi offering a toast? Because this makes more for the promotion of wine than many campaigns we might think of. Chinese people love symbolism, and with these images they realize that the president drinks a toast with a glass of wine in hand. It has become quite usual for Chinese to see President Xi with a glass of wine in state dinners, such as on the left side, the G20 in Hangzhou last September, or the One Belt, One Road Summit held in May in Beijing. So, continuing with our question, or framing the question differently, if is China a nation of wine drinkers, our best estimate of the European Union SME Center is that there are about 17 million people that can be considered as regular drinkers of wine, where here the term regular means at least 2 glasses of wine per week. We believe these 17 million people of regular drinkers of wine account for about 20% of the consumption of imported wines. Notice that the remaining 80% of consumption of imported wines is done by non-regular drinkers, by consumers that approach to drink wine to enjoy the experience because they go to a foreign restaurant, because some friends invite them, etc. However, they are not yet regular consumers of wine. Of course, the goal is to convert more of the sporadic drinkers into regular drinkers. So from this point of view, we can use, instead of the absolute numbers, a different categorization of China in terms of wine. We may say China in terms of wine is a group or sub-nation of about 17 million people that can be considered regular wine drinkers, understanding by such that they drink at least 2 glasses of wine per week, and which account for 20% or 1/5 of the total wine consumption. Notice that the sub-nation of 17 million of regular wine drinkers is quite impressive. It is interesting on its own, and this collective is growing. The remaining 80% of the wine volume sold is occasional consumption of non-regular consumer. So on the one hand, we have a nation of 17 million regular drinkers. On the other hand, millions of people that don't know much about wines, but they like the experience of drinking wine from time to time. Now, you realize we can look to China in 2 different ways. One is to have a long-term view, searching for the regular wine drinkers, trusting this group will grow in the future, or perhaps behave more tactical, a short-term view, trying to make a business from whom? From the occasional wine drinkers. Notice also that the European Union is about 60% of China wine imports. But the European Union is suffering also the pressure of existing free trade agreements between China and countries like Chile, or most recently Georgia, or Australia, or New Zealand, the fact that wine from those countries pay less or do not pay any custom duties impact directly on the price on the shelf. So one trend is that European Union wineries have to expect increasing competition from other countries and not lower competition. There are still literally thousands of importers, although the first 5 importers by value represent 50% of total wine imports. Also, the number of importers above the mark of $1 million on wine imports per year is less than 100. This means that around $1 billion in dollars of wine imports are in hands of thousands of other importers, which means these thousands of other importers are importing in total around 25,000 containers, and gives an average of orders per year of about 300,000 euros. So you need then to manage your expectation, because the reality is that other than the first 100 importers, all other thousands of importers handle orders in average of no more than 300,000 euros per year. Now, if we assume that each of these importers have 4 or 5 SKUs, normally they have 10, this means that the average importer never orders more than 2 containers per year of a wine. And if they have 10 SKUs, 1 container per year. So when a potential importer in China tells you about many containers, bear in mind that the reality is only as much as 2 containers per year and per SKU in average. And the 2 containers per year, I believe, is an upper limit. One frequent question we receive from the wineries in the European Union is about pricing. What do you think is the right price on the shelf for my wine? Why we are asked this quite often. We respond in several ways. First, we do provide the multiplier that is derived from our experience with the pricing of wines in China. The multiplier is useful to figure out, starting with the export price in euro, what will be the price in renminbi on the shop in China. Such multiplier we estimate is 33. Between 30 and 35, 33. You can see the 2 examples we show in the slide. It transforms an export price in euro into a tag price on the shop in China renminbi. So if you have 10 euro wine, export price in Europe, expect this wine to have around 335 renminbi price on the shop. We provide the export multiplier because a multiplier based on the price on the shelf in Europe is useless. Different taxes in different member states of the European Union make quite difficult a fair comparison. As an example, popular sparkling wine in China from a Spanish winery is sold in Spain at 5 euros. The same wine is sold in London in the supermarket at 7.2 euro. And this same wine, it is sold in China on the shelf at 17 euro, or about 130 renminbi. In general, I can say that the price of wine on the shelf in China is about 2.5 to 3 times the price of such wine in the country of origin. However, we believe the export multiplier we provide is a better indicator. Of course, you can expect those prices to double in the on-trade. That same wine that is priced 130 renminbi on the shop will have a price of about 250 renminbi on the wine list in a restaurant, which is about 35 euro. A conclusion here is that the imported wine in China is expensive for the average Chinese consumer. The concept of everyday wines is expensive and costly, So you set your expectation with this in mind. It is expensive for Chinese people. Now let me show you a nice trick that I believe will be of your interest. The nice trick is done with Wechat. Wechat is a kind of an equivalent of WhatsApp. Wechat is used by most of Chinese. That means near 1 billion people now. You can download for free this social media tool. It's free, and if you are planning to sell wines in China, we recommend you download and learn to use it. It's quite easy. Wechat will facilitate to you there in Europe two things which are important for your planning. First, to find out if a certain wine brand is being sold in China. Second, finding out the price in China. You can obtain this information easily via a test. You pick up a bottle on your facility or grab any bottle at the nearest supermarket to your office in Europe. Use the scan function on Wechat and scan the barcode of the wine bottle. For sure, the wine bottle in Europe has a barcode. Scan with Wechat. Most likely, if the wine is already on sale in China, Wechat will tell you where you can find it and at what price. To prepare this webinar as an example, we went to the closest convenience store to our office. By chance, it happened to be a 7-Eleven, and on the shelves I have randomly chosen a bottle of imported wine. I have scanned with my Wechat the barcode that comes from origin in the bottle. The Wechat feature tells me that such brand and bottle can be found at the price of 128 yuan in the online shop called JD.com. And also can be found in another online shop, which its name is Yihaotian. And there I can get each bottle at 93 renminbi if I buy a pack of 6 bottles. Notice from the image that such a wine bottle has a price at the 7-Eleven store of 168 renminbi. It is a difference of 40 renminbi with the price online, or about 5 euros over the online price. A 35% gap between the price offline and online, it is not unusual. Also caused by the fact that the convenience store chain probably wants to have a minimum of 18% net margin over the sales price. So this shows you first how to find if a wine is sold in China, including that of your competitors, and finding out the price, and tells you also, if you analyze the pricing, that choosing the channel determines somehow the price. Something you have to think of when choosing also the importer. We took a look to at the assortment of the importers, counting the imported wines they have per price tranche. Almost 70% of the imported wines in the assortment are below the price tag of 240 renminbi or 30 euros, which means that more than 2/3 of imported wines in China have an export price below 7 euro, and 1/3 of imported wines have an export price below 3.6 euro. We did not examine all importers, of course, but it is consistent with our next slide, which shows you the average in euros CIF price per bottle per country. We got this data from customs and correspond to 2016. It's not said in the slide, but this is 2016 data. We remind that it is an average, but gives a clear idea that the average CIF price of imported wine is in the range of euro 3.5, no more, pretty much equivalent to a price on the shelf of around 120 renminbi. We have detected, you can see in this slide, an increasing demand for cheaper wines. European Union wineries should expect more pressure on the prices for imported wines due to the free trade agreements that China has with some wine countries, such as Chile, Georgia, and others. While these free trade agreements may have little impact in a country like, for instance, Spain, because it's a country which has the lowest average CIF price per bottle, it can have a negative effect in some other wine countries of the European Union, such as Romania or Bulgaria, which are doing pretty well in the last 2 years. Let's now categorize the type of importers in China. Later on, we'll talk about importers classified by some objective parameters, but now we will focus in the way they do address the wine market in China. As with every qualitative segmentation, it can be argued it is incomplete. But we believe that most of the importers fall under one of the categories that follow. China-wide importers, quite professional usually. They have a comprehensive approach to China's wine market. They search in the wineries for a long-lasting relationship. They don't mind to report figures and clear sales channels. They, of course, want brands with a demonstrated good performance. You need to be aware that they have a broad portfolio, sometimes with hundreds of wines. They have in-house experts. They will do in-house testing to check your wines. And beware, they will demand from you that your trademarks are registered, that you have a reasonable promotional budget. Don't expect to do promotion and market development if you don't help with some budget. And they expect from your company involvement. Second category is, let's say, Chinese importers, localized importers, the bulk of existing importers in China. It is not easy to understand the structure of the sales channel. They are quite tactical in its approach to the market, and the volume is achieved more because they have relations than formal sales channels. They used to be quite reluctant to report you figures and how much stock wine they have in stock. However, I have to say that they're able to sell with a deep capillarity in China, deeper than anyone else. They can arrive to places that you will never know existed, and they are quite opportunistic, but they find opportunities that are quite hidden. And finally, you have smaller importers that are city specialized. Usually they only work in the on-trade, but they know the on-trade of the city to the bone. The assortment of wines they have is small compared with the other two types of importers. They have real expertise in wine, they're real experts, but usually make small orders, usually cross-docking and consolidating from several suppliers. You can have a very good importer, a boutique importer if you want, understanding very well your wines, but don't expect big orders from this type of importers because they work specialized in a city and working very well only the on-trade. Also, they are aimed at more sophisticated Chinese consumers, more savvy, those consumers that already know about wines. I put some example of each of the type of importers. We have as a China-wide importer ASC, an importer that covers almost all China. Customs data say ASC imported in 2015 is the data I have here, about 1.2 million 9-liter cases. It has an extensive portfolio. It is a long time I do not review, but possibly ASC has wines from almost each wine country, or at least from all major countries. It's a foreign company in China. It's not a Chinese company, which was acquired not long time ago by a Japanese company, Suntory, which is probably you are probably familiar with this Japanese company. We estimate that a company like ASC has about, I don't know, hundreds of wines, possibly 1,000 wines from maybe 100 wineries, with hundreds of sales staff. So even if you try to negotiate with ASC, you have to demonstrate a very good performance, and beware, because your SKUs will be let's say, embedded with hundreds of other wines. A domestic importer, for example, is Panati, although commercially now I believe it operates under a different name. We estimate it imports about a bit less than 2 million bottles, and it has a granularity hard to match. It makes events and promotion in cities unknown for the Europeans. It is aimed at the Chinese consumers and to companies inland. They have a telephone sales force. They make very Chinese style events, and they have a network of contacts and a knowledge of the terrain that is difficult to rival. And finally, as an example of a smaller importer, pretty much focused in the on-trade in the cities of Shanghai and Beijing, an importer called Sommelier International, a boutique importer, very professional knowledge of the wines. They import around 16,000 9-liter cases per year. And the events of this specialized importer are aimed at the consumer, which already has a certain degree of knowledge of the wine world. And you can check looking into the topics of the wine dinners they offer in places like Shanghai and like Beijing. Part of the success in China has to do with choosing the right sales channels. And this is usually linked to the ability and experience of the importer. Possibly white wine will not have a strong sales in the off-trade. However, can be a good option for the on-trade, in particular for the segment of young urban women. In this case, the off-trade channel is of little interest for that white wine. And even the online is not attractive because demand for white wines are generated by, let's say, bars, clubs, rooftop terraces, etc. So you need to match then the distribution network of a potential importer with the adequate channel for selling your type of wine. While an importer such as, I don't know, EMW states clearly that they do not attack retailers' channel, that they only do the on-trade, another one importer such as Cheers plans to have hundreds of wine shops across China. This process of matching where your wine can be sold best with the channel expertise of your potential importer is paramount. Reality is that almost everything in China is omni-channel now. Online channel permeates across all traditional sales channels. However, there are various different ways to address your sales, as you can see on the table. There are important retailers that are also importers of wine themselves. Negotiation with those retailers in some cases can happen in European headquarters rather than in China. Other importers have acquired a lot of expertise in cross-border e-commerce using bonded warehouses at the free trade zones to channel wines directly to consumers via online shops, which are usually hosted on the Wechat social media tools. There are importers that only sell online, others that only sell via their own shops. So we have all the flavors. The key issue is to understand in detail the sales channels that better fits your wine. A solution that fits all is hard to find. We recommend you acquire knowledge about the best sales channel in China for your wine Only when you have this knowledge, then start a search of an importer with expertise and knowledge in such sales channel. If you do the opposite, first the importer, then the sales channel, the winery can find later that although the importer is good or very good in certain sales channel, it doesn't have so much expertise precisely in the sales channel your wine needs. We want to stress that social network Wechat permeates all online activity and knowledge of Chinese consumers across all categories, and that includes wine. As a proof of this, notice this slide. We have importers mentioned before working different sales channels. However, all of them have an account in Wechat to keep close to consumers. It is important that you realize that Chinese consumers do not distinguish between e-commerce and social networks. For them, it's exactly the same. For the Chinese citizens, all information, influence, opinion, etc. comes through social networks. They expect that your wine brand is on the social networks, which in China means Wechat basically, and you have to discuss and ask with your importer what will be your presence there. You can see in this slide all the platforms, whatever the channel, are on Wechat, including retailers such as Metro. At the European Union SME Center, we understand you need, allow me to drink a bit of water. We understand you need a lot more than just a webinar to start selling successfully your wines in China. Soon to be published, we have prepared a complete guide on how to sell wine in China. Please allow us to insist, it is not a market report. It is not a market access guideline. It is a sales guide. With more than 70 pages, we do not talk in the sales guide about complex things of wine like malolactic fermentation. We only talk about selling wine in China. As such, we talk about the things an export manager in your winery wants to know. Who is who are the importers, where they are, how much white wine they have in assortment, what is the pricing scheme they have for wines, which country will be my competitor if we are selling bulk wine or sparkling wine, where are the wineries that are buying bulk wine, how to find if there is a place for my wine in the assortment of such importer, which exhibition is good enough for my type of wine. Does it depend the channel on the price tranches or on the price of my wine? How can I contact an importer if they do not respond to the emails? How can I calculate accurately the custom duties and taxes to know exactly how much will be the cost of customs clearing for the importer? All the questions that you need to know to sell wine in China from a sales perspective. It's not a market report. It is a guide for selling wine. It is aimed at salespeople, to the export manager. It is designed to improve your sales in China and to accelerate your entry in China. The target is clear, selling more wine from European Union wineries in China. I suggest you stay tuned because it will be released pretty soon. This is the bonus we promised in the agenda. Advancing the state of imports during the first quarter of 2017. The first quarter is not the most important quarter in the year. It is distorted by the festivities of Chinese New Year that happen in February usually. However, the initial data tell us that although the market is growing in volume, it remains flat in value. Let's not make too much drama about this because, as I have said, the first quarter is quite strange every year. However, this is a trend detected last year and mentioned before in the webinar. Consumers want more wine. However, imported wine is still expensive for the average citizen, even though disposable income at households has a healthy growth in China. Result is that imported wine orders are shifting to lower export prices. We predicted this would happen, and we are vigilant, but we think it will continue happening, going to lower export prices. For imported wines, and after conversations with several importers, the price tranche of 80 to 120 renminbi on the shelf will be where most of the imported wines will achieve sales in volume. As for the wines and the countries, the top 5 remain in the same hands, namely, I can read France, Australia, Chile, Spain, and Italy. However, within the following 5, there is a reshuffle compared with last year, with the United States recovering from 2 bad years. Worth to mention the impact of the landed price for wines from countries with a free trade agreement with China. They can damage the business of European Union wineries. I put an example so you figure out exactly what I mean. The same CIF Shanghai for a wine of $5 for a European Union wine means a landed cost on a warehouse of 7.4. Same wine from Chile, well, not same wine, but a wine with same price, CIF price from Chile, instead of having a cost at the warehouse of 7.4 because it doesn't pay taxes, pays 5.8. There is a substantial difference in the landed cost, though they share the same CIF price. So this certainly will have an impact, including the new agreement with Georgia that was selling almost nothing a couple of years ago, and now this year will probably reach the $6 million mark. That will put Georgia at the level of New Zealand and probably on the 7th place. So let's monitor closely the developments of these Eastern European countries. Let's close the webinar with our takeaway messages, which we believe are that in 2016 and for the first time ever, China imports of bottled wines surpassed the €2 billion mark. That the more professional market is emerging along with a more discerning consumer. While by no means we can consider China a nation of wine drinkers because the consumption per capita is still very low, a growing base of wine drinkers is taking an important role in the vigorous growth of wine imports. The role of third and fourth tier cities contributes to more than 100 cities in China have more than 1 million residents. The wine demand or its promotion cannot be considered only in terms of Shanghai or Beijing. There are many more cities. Over the last 3 years, the boom of e-commerce has surpassed all imagination, and it's a fact that online is cannibalizing the brick-and-mortar stores, that the average price per bottle of imported wine is reducing, and it is needed more granularity required to understand the sales channel. In closing, the conclusion is that millions of Chinese tourists get to know foreign wines directly in the country of origin. Thousands of Chinese students are abroad and they get familiarized with wine. The discovery by the Chinese that wines have a vast diversity, also in the price. A general feeling that wine is healthier than distilled drinks, along with a growing middle class. University students, young urbanites considering wine a distinctive drink. All are factors cushioning the fall of imports caused by the excess of stocks, greediness for very high margins, or the use of wine as a tool for bribery practices. We believe it is now a true market, albeit still to be developed, and it isn't too late for your winery. I encourage you to have a look at China wine business. If you have any question, please contact me in the email address that is on your slide. You have to register at the European Union SME Center. It costs nothing, it's free. You have to be a company belonging to a member state of the European Union. My marketing people tells me that if your company wants to know more about our sponsorship packages, there are various options, and you can contact Ms. Chen at this email address. The sales guide for wine I mentioned before will be launched soon. There is still a sponsorship opportunity with your logo and some other things, so contact Ms. Chen if you are interested. Other than that, I take the opportunity to say thank you. Have a good day.